All right. Hi, CP English 3. Today you're going to be focusing on the next two sections of our study of Beowulf. And to do that, we're going to be working with the PDF that contains the entire selection. We've already read The Wrath of Grendel. We've already read The Coming of Beowulf. And on Wednesday, each of you did a more in-depth study of those texts. Right now, today our focus is going to be the battle with Grendel, which begins on page 49. And it goes up to page 51. And then we're also going to be taking a look at the monster's lair, which is a rather shorter section that ends on page 52. Just like last time, well, not just like last time, because I'm not going to fill in the blanks for you, because I learned my lesson. We are going to be, sorry, I'm scrolling on random things. Let me pick up where I need to pick up with here. Okay, there we go. We are going to be working with the skill of doing paraphrasing for our first read of any task, okay? And so just like I had noted before, in a first read, our goal is to identify any key details and answer any reading checks that we might see in the side of the textbook. I may or may not have integrated that into the text. And then on a second reading or a third reading, we go a little bit more in depth, okay? And so we'll be flip-flopping a little bit this week, and then once we meet next week all at the same time during our live classes, things should be a little bit more straightforward. I do recommend flipping between two tabs. You could do a split screen, but the only thing that can be an issue with that is when it's hard to see the text. Okay, our first selection is going to be from lines 285 to 324. If you can recall where we left off in the text, Beowulf had just introduced himself to Hrothgar, and he had asked permission to fight Grendel. Now, he did say that because Grendel fights with no weapons, he too would fight with no weapons. And you saw some conflicting attitudes that those pagan and Christian beliefs commingled, even though they don't really align with each other, with Beowulf when he talked about this battle. In one hand, he said God will decide the winner, and on the other hand, he said that fate will unwind as it must. So it just brings up the question of whether or not, does God make these decisions, or are these decisions already made? So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Like our first reading is going to be up to lines 324, 285 to 324. You can follow along with the video. You might benefit from having another tab open in which the PDF is just there. Okay, so we're going to see how this plays out. Out of the marsh, from the foot of misty hills and bogs, bearing God's hatred, Grendel came, hoping to kill anyone he could trap on this trip to High Heorot. He moved quickly through the cloudy night up from his swampland, sliding silently toward the gold-shining hall. He had visited Hrothgar's home before, knew the way, but never before, nor after that night, found Heorot so defended so firmly. Lost my spot. His reception so harsh, he journeyed forever joyless, straight to the door, then snapped it open, tore its iron fasteners with a touch, and rushed angrily over the threshold. He strode quickly across the inlaid floor, snarling and fierce. His eyes gleamed in the darkness, burned with a gruesome light. Then he stopped, seeing the hall crowded with sleeping warriors, stuffed with rows of young soldiers resting together. And his heart laughed. He relished the sight, intended to tear the life from those bodies by morning. The monster's mind was hot with the thought of food and the feasting his belly would soon know. But fate that night intended Grendel to gnaw the broken bones of his last human supper. Human eyes were watching his evil steps, waiting to see his swift, hard claws. Grendel snatched at the first gate he came to, ripped him apart, cut his body to bits with powerful jaws, drank the blood from his veins, and bolted him down hands and feet. Death and Grendel's great teeth came together, snapping life shut. Then stepped to another still body, clutched at Beowulf with his claws, grasped at a strong-hearted wakeful sleeper, and was instantly seized himself, claws bent back, as Beowulf leaned up on one arm. Ooh, this is getting, full of action. Okay. That night, let's look at the paraphrase that I have. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I'm not quite happy with this zoom. Oh, I was at 200%. That was why. Okay. I'm going to move my little face over here. Bouncing all around. All right. Let's look at the paraphrase I have for you here. It says, that night, Grendel leaves his home and goes to Heorot. His heart blanked, and he is happy when he sees all the men sleeping there. He grabs one of the blank and drinks his blank as blank watches. He then grabs Beowulf, who bends back Grendel's blank as he rises to the floor. All right, let's get some key details here. First thing he does, if I go back and look at line 305, it says right here, looking for it, his heart laughed. So this is someone who is evil, but who takes joy in evil. Like he's celebrating it. It's not like, some tormented soul that's depicted, at least in this narrative. All right. And he's happy when he sees all the men sleeping there. He grabs one of the, who does he grab? We could put warrior in there. Said he was sleeping warriors, but arguably you could be more specific. You could put warriors, who was one of Beowulf's men. You could just put one of the gates, because those are the name of Beowulf's men, okay? And what did he do? What did he do when he grabbed that body? Oh, I got to keep moving my face around here, goodness. This is pretty grotesque. He cut his body to bits with his powerful jaws, look on line 317, and drank the blood from his veins. Goodness, this is a bit gory. Okay. Drinks his blood. As somebody actually is watching this, it says that to us in line 312, or line 311 to 312. Human eyes were watching his evil steps. Who seems to be the only one awake while this is happening? Well, it seems to be the person that's awake, the wakeful sleeper. Beowulf's actually watching. So when you watch, this is a little bizarre. Beowulf kind of let one of his warriors take one for the team. I don't know what that means, but he's not really criticized for it. He then grabs Beowulf, who bends back Grendel's, what was it again? I'm going to flip back. One of his claws bent back as Beowulf leaned up. Okay. Let's read the next section. It's a smaller one, 325 to 341. Sorry I'm bouncing so much here. Again, if you're not watching the video, that's fine. Just listening to it, that's not a bad idea. If you don't get car sick. Okay. 325. Ooh, look at all these kennings. That shepherd of evil, guardian of crime, knew at once that nowhere on earth had he met a man whose hands were harder. His mind was flooded with fear, but nothing could take his talents and himself from that tight, hard grip. Grendel's one thought was to run from Beowulf, flee back to his march, and hide there. This was a different Herod than the hall he had emptied. But Higlac's follower, who's that? Oh, that's Beowulf. Right, nice kenning. Remembered his final boast, and standing erect, stopped the monster's flight, fastened those claws in his fist until they cracked. Clutched Grendel closer. The infamous killer fought for his freedom, wanting no flesh but retreat, desiring nothing but escape. His claws had been caught, he was trapped. That trip to Herod was a miserable journey for the writhing monster. Okay. So, let's look at the paraphrase and fill in some key details here. Grendel realizes he has never encountered a man so strong. I hope you're still thinking about this, even though I'm guiding you through it. And he felt scared, and his thought was about staying and facing it like the monster he should? No. About running away. And again, that was a footnote in the earlier text if we go back. Before Beowulf arrived, let me show you here. Before Beowulf arrived. Where it said here, literary lore suggests that monsters are only interested in fights they will win, which is a bit cowardly. It's like a bully. They only go against people they know that they can't overpower them or get them back. All right. We're going to be picking up in line 342. Okay. So 365. So Beowulf basically grabbed his claw and I guess standing up, and he's cracking Grendel's claws, and it's like Grendel wants to run. It's like all kinds of a hot mess. All right, let's see how this plays out. Line 342. The high hall rang, its roof boards swayed, and the Danes shook with terror. Down the aisles the battle swept, angry and wild. Herod, which is the mead hall, trembled, wonderfully built to withstand the blows. The struggling great bodies beating at its beautiful walls, shaped and fastened with iron, inside and out. This is talking about the mead hall. Artfully worked. The building stood firm. Its benches rattled, fell to the floor. Gold-covered boards grating as Grendel and Beowulf battled across them. Hrothgar's wise men had fashioned Herod to stand forever. Only fire they had planned could shatter what such skill had put together, swallow in hot flames such splendor of ivory and iron and wood. Suddenly the sounds changed. The Danes started a new terror, cowering in their beds as the terrible screams of the Almighty's enemy, counting for Grendel, sang in the darkness. The horrible shrieks of pain and defeat, the tears torn out of Grendel's taut throat, Hel's captive caught in the arms of him who of all the men on earth was the strongest. Okay. Beowulf seems to be winning. So the mead hall shakes as Beowulf battled with Grendel, but Hrothgar's men had constructed such a strong building that only what could destroy it? Fire. Okay, lines 366 to 378. Let's continue. That mighty protector of men, that's a kenning for Beowulf, meant to hold the monster till its life leaped out, knowing the fiend was no use to anyone in Denmark. All of Beowulf's band had jumped from their beds, ancestral swords raised and ready, determined to protect their prince if they could. Their courage was great, but all wasted. They could hack at Grendel from every side, trying to open a path for his evil soul, but their points could not hurt him. The sharpest and hardest iron could not scratch at his skin, for that sin-stained demon, Grendel, had bewitched all men's weapons, laid spells that blunted every mortal man's blade. And yet his time had come. His days were over, his death near. Down to hell he would go, swept groaning and helpless to the waiting hands of still worse fiends. Now he discovered, once the afflicter of men, tormentor of their days, what it meant to feud with Almighty God. I guess Beowulf is Almighty God's representative here. Grendel saw that his strength was deserting him, his claws bound fast, Hygelac's brave follower, Beowulf, tearing at his hands. The monster's hatred rose higher, but his power was gone. He twisted in pain, and the bleeding sinews deep in his shoulders snapped, muscle and bone split and broke. The battle was over. Beowulf had been granted new glory. Grendel escaped, but wounded as he was, could flee to his den, his miserable hole at the bottom of the marsh, only to die, to wait for the end of all his days. And after that bloody combat, the Danes laughed with delight. He who had come to them from across the sea, bold and strong-minded, had driven affliction off, purged Herrick clean. He was happy now with that night's fierce work. The Danes had been served as he'd boasted he'd served them. Beowulf, a prince of the Geats, had killed Grendel, ended the grief, the sorrow, the suffering forced on Hrothgar's helpless people by a bloodthirsty feud. No Dane doubted the victory, for the proof, hanging high, from the rafters where Beowulf had hung it, was the monster's arm, claw, and shoulder, and all. Yeesh. Okay, I went 2 sections here, I guess. All right. It says Beowulf intended to hold Grendel until he died that night. The other Geats attacked Grendel, the monster, with their swords. But Grendel had cast a spell on their weapons that made the sword tips not sharp, but blunt. Okay, so like Grendel has magic, and magic's evil in the Christian world. So you think about the author writing this. Beowulf's battle with Grendel ends when he tears off Grendel's arm, and the monster flees to his den. The Danes celebrate Beowulf's victory, and as proof he won, Beowulf hangs up his trophy, the arm, claw, hand, from the rafters, which are like the top part in the ceiling of the mead hall. Okay, moving on. This little italicized section here tells us that the excerpts we're getting are not just one after the other. So this is summarizing a passage that we're not reading from the epic poem, so they're just summarizing it for us. So let's read it together. It says, the Danes celebrate Beowulf's victory. That night, though, Grendel's mother kills Hrothgar's closest friend and carries off her child's claw. The next day, the horrified king tells Beowulf about the 2 monsters and their underwater lair. There's more. Okay. This is Hrothgar talking here. And we have a couple blanks for this, but not many. Okay. We're going to read lines 411 to... I might just read all of it together and then we'll go back. All right. I've heard that my people, Hrothgar's people, the Danes, peasants working in the fields, have seen a pair of 2 such fiends wandering in the moors and marshes. Giant monsters living in those desert lands. And they've said to my wise men, as well as they could see, one of the devils was a female creature. The other, they say, walked through the wilderness like a man, but mightier than a man. They were frightened and they fled, hoping to find help in Herod. They named the huge one Grendel. If he had a father, no one knew him, or whether there'd been others before these two, hidden evil before hidden evil. They live in secret places, windy cliffs, wolf dens where water pours from the rocks and runs underground, where mist steams like black clouds, and the groves of trees growing out over their lake are all covered with frozen spray. And wind wind down snake-like roots that reach as far as the water and help keep it dark. At night, that lake burns like a fire, like a torch. No one knows its bottom. No wisdom reaches such depths. A deer hunted through the woods by packs of hounds, a stag with great horns, though driven through the forest from faraway places, prefers to die on those shores. He refuses to save its life in that water. It isn't far, nor is it a pleasant spot. When the wind stirs and storms, waves splash toward the sky, as dark as the air, as black as the rain that the heavens weep. Our only help, again, lies with you, Beowulf. Grendel's mother is hidden in her terrible home in a place you've not seen. Seek it if you dare. Save us once more, and again twisted gold, heaped up ancient treasure, will reward you for the battle you win. And Beowulf resolves to kill Grendel's monstrous mother, and he travels to the lake in which she lives. Okay, so I give you that summary here. Okay. So Hrothgar tells Beowulf how his people have seen two creatures that haunt the moors, one that was a female and one that was named Grendel. Grendel's background is mysterious. No one knows who his father is, and we'll talk about that actually on Monday, because lineage, I can tell, is very important to the Anglo-Saxon culture, and you did some work with that on Wednesday. At night, the lake they dwell in burns like a torch, and no one knows if the lake has a bottom. Hrothgar asks Beowulf for his help again. He is their only hope. Can I make myself full screen here? No, I disappeared. Oh well. So that's it. So tomorrow, depending on your cohort, you will have. I can't give one blanket announcement because I'm making this video for all my cohorts. But pay attention to what day it is and the schedule. I'm sorry I can't say goodbye to you with a video because I accidentally just made it go away. But hit turn 8 on this, okay? And I am looking forward to seeing and meeting with you next.